This is Event Horizon, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson. This is the podcast that takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. This is the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Guys, welcome to episode 65, and I think it's going to be a fun one. The title of the episode is Damar Hamlin, a Quantum Miracle. Let me repeat that for you one more time for you football fans. Damar Hamlin, a Quantum Miracle. You know what we have to do before we start the episode. Yeah, I have to give you the disclaimer. I'm not a religious expert, far from it. I've been thrown out of more churches than I've been welcomed into. I'm not a physicist, theoretical, or otherwise, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. And I think that gives me the right to do some research, apply first principles, and bring back to this podcast to share with you the ideas and discoveries that I stumbled onto. Fair? Fair. Now, back to episode 65. Damar Hamlin, a Quantum Miracle. Now, for those of you who are not sports fans, let me give you a little recap of what happened. Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals were playing in a crucial game that would decide the seeding for the playoffs, which are now underway. In the first quarter of the January 2nd Monday Night Football game between the two teams, Damar Hamlin, a 24-year-old safety, tackled the Bengals receiver, Tee Higgins, and took him to the ground in an ordinary type tackle. To me, it looked more like a matador taking on a bull and getting the wrong end of the horn to the chest, but nothing spectacular. Hamlin stood up immediately after the tackle, took 2 steps, but then collapsed almost lifelessly to the turf. The receiver, Tee Higgins, wasn't hurt at all. Well, it turns out after the hit and after Hamlin jumped back to his feet, he went into cardiac arrest and was immediately administered CPR in the less than 2 to 3 minutes after the entire world witnessed him collapsing. It was shocking. They revived his heart on the field, to the shock of all the players who witnessed what was happening. I guess somehow they understood that his heart had stopped beating and that he was on his way to the other side. But after being revived on the field, he was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where he suffered a second cardiac arrest at their facility. A second event. Now, for what I've learned, individuals who suffer a cardiac arrest event in the hospital where there's numerous experts to help revive that individual, only about 10% survive. I'm not saying 10% of the people on a football field. I'm saying 10% of the people who are laying in a hospital bed that go into cardiac arrest survive that event. Hamlin survived 2. That's why I'm saying Hamlin was saved by quantum prayers that overloaded the universal quantum computer and forced it to reset. Mark, what are you talking about? Right? What? Quantum computer that runs the universe? Yeah, guys, I want you to go back and re-listen to the episodes on who is God. We cover a lot of this and you'll understand why I'm calling the universe, or saying that there's a quantum computer that runs the universe, because leading scientists and your favorite guy, Elon Musk, said that we're living in a simulated digital universe run by a quantum computer. So now that you know I'm not the one making that up, your next question is probably, how do you pray to a quantum computer and force it to reset and take the action you want? Well, the Bible says to talk to God, you have to have at least 3 people. In geometry, 3 people, 3 dots create a plane of existence. So you need at least 3 people to create a plane of existence to submit a prayer to God. It's the reason why we have church, we have fellowship, because you have to have a minimum number of people submitting a consistent prayer for it to reach the quantum computer. Now, God, throughout the Bible, gives us many ways to amplify that prayer. Mark, again, kombucha, please. Your brain is out there today. No, it's not. Many of you surely have heard of all of these different types of ley lines that crisscross the planet, where there's a higher level of energy that's being emitted. But I just want to take you back to the Bible, where every time one of our ancient forefathers witnessed the presence of God, they were told to put a church there. The burning bush, great temple, all of these places that became sacred are sacred because they have a way of amplifying your consciousness, giving it a boost so that it can have the quantum effect. Think I'm joking? Just go back through the Bible and count all the times where a church was put where God was seen. And if you don't like that, just go look at where the Templars put all their churches, and their alignments coincide with these ley lines that we talk about. It's not a coincidence. So, for those of you who continue to think that humans of today are at the cutting edge of intelligence, I keep telling you, the closer you go back to the source, the higher the intelligence. I don't have to repeat my mind game that I shared so many episodes ago, but maybe I do. Take an original and go to a copier and keep making copies of a copy. At some point, you're dealing with faded paper that is illegible. So, the original Adam that was given dominion, if you look across other texts, was feared by the angels because of that intelligence. That he stood beside God and walked in the garden with God. So the ancients knew how to multiply and magnify their consciousness to get a reaction out of the quantum computer. And I think we're stumbling into it. And Damar Hamlin is a perfect example of that power. The power that was feared at the Tower of Babel that we've talked about on this podcast. And my own theory of this planet being converted into a quantum computer by our ancients. But we'll cover that a little bit later on in the podcast. So if I'm right that there are ways to amplify using the ancient ley lines, in the digital world of today, We have the World Wide Web. We have cable TV. We have a way of grabbing mass consciousness and focusing it on a single topic like no other earlier group of civilizations has ever had. And with that ability and the fact that this digital content is being broadcast, bounced around on satellites, you have an opportunity to overload the quantum computer. You say, Mark, if that's true, give me some facts around that. Okay. The Bills and the Bengals, their players prayed for Hamlin on the field during the incident in front of 23, well, just might as well say 24 million viewers. And guess what? That was the most since Monday Night Football was moved to ESPN. CNN noted that while the two teams were playing, they averaged that amount. Viewership grew by almost 2 million when the incident shifted to coverage of Hamlin. So there's an argument to be made that after the initial incident, the initial cardiac arrest, there were almost 24 million people crying out in prayer for the same thing, for Hamlin. Now, I know personally, I was emotionally moved by what I saw on the field. Emotionally moved. My wife and I were emotionally moved to tears. We stayed up well past 1 o'clock in the morning, just looking for an update on what happened with that young man. And if all 24 million people were doing the same thing, repeating the same name and asking for the same outcome, just like a denial of service attack, at some point the computer is going to crash. Second example, 32 NFL teams included pray for Damar on their Twitter avatars. So that digital content, processing that through all the servers throughout the world, bouncing around on the satellites, amplified the same request. Pray for Damar. LeBron James, after a Laker game, repeated the same request for a prayer for Hamlin on ESPN. Again, reaching millions of people and encouraging them to stay focused on the prayer for Damar. And ESPN analyst Dan Orlovsky prayed for Damar Hamlin on live national TV. That prayer went viral, but while it was live, 5.2 million viewers tuned in to watch it. You see how large the numbers are getting? They were all focused on the same thing, sending the same request to the quantum computer. NFL executive Troy Vincent, a Pro Bowl cornerback in his 15 years in the NFL,